All right. What I've got for you today is a video on understanding ball flight and how to manipulate the ball to do exactly what it is that you want. There's really several different ways that people do it. However, there really is only one thing that the golf ball understands. The golf ball understands how does it get struck by the golf club. That's basically it, right? So if you could have a conversation with the golf ball and say, "Hey, golf ball, what did I just tell you?" Well, it would say, well, it was struck maybe from a descending blow, right? Because it came off low and hot. Maybe it was topped. Maybe it was crushed right here in the forehead and it rolled along the ground. Maybe it was struck with the club face closing, right, which would cause the spin of the golf ball to take off and curve to the left, or if it was struck with an open face, it would take off and spin to the right. So what I'm going to do is just kind of show you a couple of things here real close. We have an axis that the golf ball is going to spin on, and trust me, every shot, even a putt, is going to start out spinning backwards. I guess there is an exception. If you flat topped it, maybe it would start rolling this way. But even putts start off with a little bit of a skid, which means the ball is actually spinning backwards just a little bit on the putting green, and then it catches and it rolls forward. So let's consider that every golf ball has some form of reverse spin to it. So it gets struck with the golf club and it takes off spinning. Well, if it's struck perfectly straight, well, then the axis that golf ball is moving on is exactly backwards, right? So you can see the word Titleist as it kind of spins this way on this axis, correct? Now, if it's struck with an open club face, the face is sitting like this, there's definitely some back spin that takes place, but what happens is that back spin has been kicked a little bit to the right. So what happens is as it goes up, it spins, but then the axis that the ball spins on actually starts spinning a little bit this way. So as the dimples grab the air and the friction and the resistance takes place, what happens is that ball takes off and it starts to spin off to the right. Okay. Conversely, if you were to strike it with a draw or a closed club face position, same thing happens. That ball starts off and starts going backwards, but it kicks again a little to the left. So if we're looking down this fairway and the golf club comes in here with a closed club face and it strikes that ball in this direction, well then yes, it's going to be spinning backwards because we have this amount of loft, right? It's going backwards, but it's going backwards with a different axis that causes it to go out to the right, grab the air, and start spinning back, right? So there's a deflection that takes place, an impact that takes place, and then a spin, and it's always going to spin backwards. That's number one. So a lot of misconception is that when people say, well, you get more distance out of a draw because of the top spin. Well, it's not the case. The golf ball doesn't really care if it's moving from left to right or right to left. All it cares is how does it land, right? If this was the fairway, how does it land? So if it's landing in down this way and it has a hook spin but it's coming in from straight out of the air, it's going to stop. Conversely, if it has a fade spin and it comes in really low and hits and rolls, it's going to roll out. So the golf ball doesn't really care if it's coming in from left to right or right to left. All that it knows is the other parameters, right? So backspin is an influence. Humidity is an influence because there's resistance that takes place, the particles in the air. And then the turf condition is another influence. Temperature can be an influence. So when I started out the session here, I wanted to explain to you that there is a ball flight control that we're trying to achieve. Well, why would we want to hit a fade or a draw? Well, the situation might be that we're stuck behind a tree and we need to be able to curve that ball one way or the other. Well, there's a couple of schools of thought on that, and I'll explain both of them. I'm going to call one the natural and one the mechanic. All right, there's an engineering type approach, and then there's an athletic approach. The athlete will typically say, okay, well, I'm just going to work my hands harder. I'm going to hold the club off. So, for example, a fade would come from the person aiming to the left, picking the club up more steeply, holding on with the pressure and the force of their arms, and as they go through the ball, they just kind of cut across it and hold it off. Right, now I'm purposely not hitting these far because I'm hoping that the camera is actually going to pick up some of that flight. So I'll demonstrate that again. Aiming to the left, picking the club up, kind of hitting down and across and just kind of holding it off. Right? That is a hold off fade or a cut shot because you're cutting across it. The opposite of that would be a release hook. Right, so the athlete is going to turn around and say, okay, well, I need to close the club face through impact violently. Instead of holding it off with my muscles, I'm going to actively throw my muscles and roll my hands over. So what they're going to do is they're going to kind of aim out here to the right, and then as they fire their hands, they're going to really try to wing that club through as hard as they can. So here it goes. I'm out to the right, and as I come in here, I'm going to roll, right? This is where you get pronation, supination, right? Supination this way. I want some soup. That's how you remember that. Pronation this way. So what happens is as I roll through, I'm supinating my left arm like crazy, pronating my right arm like crazy to try to get that club face. So, boom. Right, didn't get very high off the ground, but hopefully you could see that. It definitely had a hook to it. So I'll do that again here and then boom, right? So when I was a kid, that's what I did. Most of the time, that's what we think. We're just going to take our hands in our body and we're going to manipulate the club to cause, it's a cause and effect relationship. We're going to impact the ball, right, in such a way that it's going to cause the ball to curve. Well, that's the athletic style. The mechanical style or the engineering style would be to say, wait a minute, why would I change all of my swing and my timing and my release? Why would I create additional stress on my muscles to hold stuff off or to fire faster? What the engineer would do is say, okay, well, if the machine is built and the machine just swings naturally round and round, well, then why wouldn't we just simply alter the club position, right? So this is the iron Byron type move. So iron Byron is obviously a machine, and his swing plane doesn't change. His arm length can change for different length clubs, and they can raise them up and lower them down on a platform, but the basic rotation of his swing and the machine stays the same. So there isn't any manipulation at the last minute to hold stuff off or to roll it over. So to create a fade or a draw or a slice or a hook with iron Byron, what they have to do is just simply attach the club in a different position. So if it's attached square, it goes straight. If it's attached closed, it has a hook, and if it's attached open, it's a fade. So if I wanted to use that method to control ball flight, well then instead of, I would do the same thing. I would aim left, that's consistent, but instead of holding the club off and opening the face, swinging out to in, I would just take my normal swing and I would just set the face open at address. So just like a flop shot, right? I'm just going to open the club face. I am aiming left, but then I'm just going to swing right here, what appears on that camera angle to be inside. But what I'm going to do is just release just like normal. Okay, and that's called a release fade. Now, I spent some time with Jim Flick, and he was having me hit different shots out at Superstition Mountain when I was working with Mike Malaska out there. And Jim had me hit some shots, and he said, hit a fade. So I hit a hold-off cut shot. And he says, you don't really know how to hit a fade, do you? And I said, well, yeah, I do. I just did it. And he basically told me that no good fader of the golf ball plays any form of a hold-off shot. So, and I think what he was referring to was really Jack Nicklaus, and that Jack played a release cut. So what I'm showing you here are those two different options. My preference is to keep my swing the same. I've spent way too much time working on creating good rotation and athletic sequence and building my strength to create power I don't really want to have to change all that just to maneuver the ball. So if I set up to hit a draw or a hook, the alignment goes to the right, but then all I do is just close the face at address, right? So now my swing is going to be the same, but it's going, the iron byron is pointed out here to the right. So then I just take my same swing and release it, right? Then I get that shot shape. So what I want to do is just share with you what the golf ball can do most naturally. The golf ball has a very, very easy time going low left and high right. Okay? Consider that. It's very, very easy to hit a low hook and very, very easy to hit a high fade. Now what's difficult is to do the other. It's very, very difficult to hit a low fade and a high hook. Right? The reason for that is because naturally, when you open up the club face, you're going to get height. So opening up the club face produces a high fade that moves to the right, right? So opening the face is like a flop shot. Now this is a 5-iron. Open up the face, swing. I'm going to swing toward this red flag here. All right, but what you'll see is it kind of comes off and it falls to the right. So a high fade is easy and a low draw is easy. And I really feel like the easiest way to accomplish that is to keep the swing that you've been training exactly the same. Don't change it. Learn how to manipulate ball flight by gripping the club in a different position so that the face allows you to do that. So with all that being said, ideally a straight shot is the one you want to play if you can. So if I take my aim here with a square club face, what I know from a dead straight club face is that I'm going to actually produce a little draw. Okay? My swing naturally produces a draw from a square club face. So what I've learned is that if I set my club face a couple of degrees open and I take that same natural swing, now what I've got is a little baby fade with that same swing. So hopefully you've picked up some good tips on how to control ball flight by keeping the swing that you've been training and altering the club face. It'll definitely help you next time you're out trying to play this great game of golf and manipulate ball flight. Truth be told, this is where we mess up, right? This is where we come